Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to the Midlife Revolution. I'm your host, Megan Connor. And tonight we are going to be recapping day 3 of the Donna Adelson trial, coming to you live from Tallahassee, Florida. Now, I'm not in Tallahassee, but the court proceedings are live in Tallahassee. And for those of you who are new to the case, I'll try to give you a very brief rundown. In fact, I'll even share my screen with you here so that you can see all of the connections that happen in this case. Donna Adelson is the matriarch of a wealthy family from South Florida. At the center, you see here Charlie Adelson. Charlie is Donna's son, her youngest son. And Wendi, who you see pictured here, is Donna's daughter. Now, Wendi was married to Dan Markel. They were married for about 5 years, and they had 2 sons together. They went through a very contentious divorce. And at the center of the divorce was the idea that Wendi, who had moved to Tallahassee with her law professor husband, Dan Markel, wanted to be in South Florida with her parents, Donna, who you see here, and Harvey, who you see here. The problem is Dan was not going to let that happen. He wanted the kids to stay in Tallahassee, where they had already started to put down roots and where he had a successful job as a law professor. So at the end of the custody battle, Wendi's petition to move the children to South Florida was denied with prejudice, which means that she could never bring this up in court again. Well, Donna decided to take matters into her own hands, allegedly. She conspired with her son Charlie to take care of the Dan problem. Charlie had ties to Katherine Magban. That was his girlfriend at the time. And he knew that she had connections to some unsavory characters. In fact, the father of her children was Sigfredo Garcia here. They had an on-again, off-again relationship. But Katherine knew when Charlie asked if there was somebody who could do some harm to Dan Markel, Katherine knew exactly who to ask. She asked Sigfredo Garcia. Now, Katherine served as the go-between between Charlie and Sigfredo. So the 2 men never met, never spoke. And Charlie was the go-between between Katherine and Donna, although they did meet and they probably did speak. Even Wendi had a connection to Katherine Magban because Charlie brought her around a couple of times for family dinners and even for an outing to the beach. Well, on the day in question, July 19th of 2016, Dan Markel had just dropped off his 2 boys at their preschool, and then he went to the gym. But what he didn't know was that he was being followed by Sigfredo Garcia and Sigfredo's best friend, Luis Rivera. They had rented a Prius, and they had bought a gun. They followed him home from the gym, approached him in the garage, and shot him twice. A neighbor who was nearby heard the shot and saw the Prius speed off and went over and found Dan in the front seat of his car, his cell phone on the ground, a business card in his hand, his glasses shattered, and he was obviously in a very bad situation. The neighbor called 911. But unfortunately, Dan died about 11 hours later. Now, since this all went down, there have been 4 convictions already. Everyone on the right side of this little thumbnail. Luis Rivera, the driver, Sigfredo Garcia, the shooter, Katherine Magban, the girlfriend, and Charlie Adelson have all been convicted and found guilty in this murder for hire conspiracy. Now on trial is Donna Adelson, the matriarch of the family and allegedly the mastermind behind these crimes. However, if you listen to my day 2 recap, after Wendi Adelson was on the stand, and especially today after hearing her former boyfriend on the stand, I've completely changed my mind about this case. I no longer think that it was Donna pulling the strings. I actually think it was allegedly Wendi. And we're going to get into the testimony of that boyfriend here in just a second. First, though, I want to talk to you about the bump Because that's the main question that I've been getting, other than the fact that Donna's wearing headphones and what's that about? Well, apparently Donna has very narrow ear canals and Precious gets a lot of earwax built up in them. And, you know, the prison is not the best place to get medical treatment, especially for little things like earwax. And so therefore, Donna is not able to hear very well. She's wearing headphones, but I think the defense is largely playing up the old lady grandma thing to try and gain sympathy from the jury. And just as a side note, by the way, guys, this is not my normal voice. I want to apologize. I've been fighting the South Texas allergies and losing. I'm actually feeling a lot better today, but I'm still, obviously, my throat is not in great shape. So I apologize for my weird sounding voice tonight. So now what I want to share with you is the video that jurors saw in the trial of Katherine Magban. She went on trial twice. The first time she was tried at the same time as her baby daddy, Sigfredo Garcia. And the jury was unable to find her guilty. In fact, they were hung. There was one juror that was kind of holding out. And so Katherine had to be retried on her own. She was eventually found guilty. But this is the video of the bump the jurors saw during that trial. What you're going to see is undercover footage of Donna Adelson leaving a shopping center and being approached by an undercover detective who hands her a piece of paper with a picture of an article featuring Dan Markel's murder and the number 5,000 written on it with a phone number. He explains to her that his cousin is in jail and he helped take care of the problem they had up north. That's all code for the shooting of Dan Markel. Let's watch. The crossbody bag. She crosses the street. And over here is another undercover officer who is photographing the entire event.
Excuse me, Mrs. Adelson? How you doing? Just want to give you this. Listen. No, don't be scared. Listen, just want to let you know that we know that your family has been taking care of Katie and her friend Pluto for quite some time after your problem up north has been resolved. And I want to let you know that my brother, he's incarcerated. He helped your family with this problem you guys had up north. And we want to make sure that he's going through some rough times. And we want to make sure that you take care of what he's going through, the way you're taking care of Katie and Tuco. Well, this will explain it. Thank you.
So Donna, obviously shaken by this interaction, not really sure what to think of it. And she goes ahead and tucks the paper into her purse. And then as she walks away, you can see her body language very agitated, very stressed. She starts touching her forehead and her face. These are all indicators of a stressful situation. Now, the reason that this happened is because after the murder, they had some evidence. They realized that this was a for-hire plot. And they had some evidence that they thought was pretty compelling. But the communications between the co-conspirators had gone quiet. And so they decided to do this bump to try and get people talking again about what was going on. And it worked. Essentially, the co-conspirators who had stopped talking to each other immediately started the lines of communication back up again. Donna immediately called Charlie, told him about the situation in code, said they needed to meet together. And then later there were phone calls recorded because they were under surveillance already. But Charlie calling his mom saying, I'm going to call the number. I'm going to find out what's going on. Well, eventually they did start talking to each other. They started talking to all of the co-conspirators, and all of this was under surveillance, and it was captured by the FBI in all of this footage, as well as lots of recordings that went on. So the bump is what sort of started the ball rolling again for these co-conspirators to speak to each other and sort of reveal the plot that was going on. And then arrests started being made. Now, today in court, there was a lot. We had a lot of witnesses today that were just key to this entire plot. And Mrs. Daly, thanks for being a new member. Thanks to all of you who are here for the first time. For those of you who are just joining, I've been covering this case just for the last few weeks during Donna's trial. I was turned on to this case by Joel at Surviving the Survivor. Please go over there and follow their page. They have excellent coverage of this case. Joel is actually there live in the courtroom every single day. And they have a lot of attorneys commenting on their channel and on their page. The reason this case was so compelling to me is because it is yet another instance at the intersection of narcissism and crime, where we see an enmeshed family system that is really unhealthy, has very unhealthy ways of relating and communicating. They're entitled. They think they're above the law. They think they're allowed to just get away with whatever they want. The hubris here is just absolutely stunning. And so it's fascinating to me because there are so many parallels between this case and the case of my family, the Lori Vallow Daybell case. Now, without mentioning any more about that case, I want to go right to what happened in the courtroom today. We had Wendi Adelson's ex-boyfriend up first, the man she was dating and broke up with just a week before the shooting happened. We also had two of Charlie Adelson's ex-girlfriends, both Katherine Magban, who is the go-between between Charlie and the shooter, and also another ex-girlfriend who was dating Charlie at the time the bump happened. And she noted a significant change in his behavior when this happened. So I want to unpack everything that was testified to in court today, and we're going to play a couple of clips as well. First of all, to go to Jeff Lacass. Now, let me see if I can quickly pull up a picture. Oop. There we go. So this is Jeff Lacass. He is a professor at Florida State University, and he and Wendi dated from approximately September of 2013 until July of 2014. Now, the incident happened on July 19th of 2014, and he and Wendi Adelson broke up just about a week before, and this was really no coincidence. He was an associate professor at the time, and he noted that in June or July of 2013 is when the relocation motion was denied. And this was Wendi's last big push to get the judge to grant her permission to take the boys down to Miami, where Wendi's parents, Donna and Harvey, were living, so that she could be with them. And this motion was denied with prejudice, which, as I said before, means that Wendi could no longer bring any motion for relocation before the court. And that was pretty devastating. Jeff testified that Wendi was a difficult person. She wanted to be with her family. She hated Tallahassee. And he said even their second date, she was in tears over relocating. And he noted that every single time something got filed in this contentious divorce, she and the rest of the family would be in a mood. He said this was a family without boundaries. And I completely agree. This family was completely enmeshed. Nobody in this family was allowed to have an identity outside of the family. And we saw yesterday testimony from the oldest son, Robert Adelson, who has distanced himself from his parents and his siblings, probably living a much happier life away from this family. And he had a lot of bombshells to drop. His testimony is on my Adelson playlist right on the homepage of my YouTube channel. If you go over there and look at my Adelson playlist, you will see a strange son testimony. It's really important. So I hope that you'll go over there and listen to it if you have not already heard it. So basically, Jeff testifies that Donna Adelson was in Tallahassee from September until April. September of 13 until April of 14. This was quite a long visit. This is quite a large amount of time for mom, Donna, to be living with Wendi and the boys while she's trying to date Jeff Lacass. He said that in March of 2014, that Katherine Magban was at a dinner at Yardbird with Charlie Adelson. So it was Charlie, Katherine, Jeff, and Wendi. Charlie and Wendi being brother and sister. This was kind of a double date situation. And Charlie introduced Katherine as his new girlfriend. This was just in March of 2014. Katherine noted that her baby daddy was in trouble with the police. And Jeff said this was much more than just a few parking tickets. It was really, really bad. He was pretty upset by some of the things that he heard Katherine relate. Then after dinner, Katherine went home and the rest of them went back to Charlie's place. He noted it was a very nice house. There was a hot tub, and he spent some time in the hot tub with Charlie and his roommate, who was also a doctor. And Charlie kept bragging about the fact that he hung out with all types, not only doctors, but also people who were rather unsavory. And he mentioned that they might be people from the Cuban neighborhood that were friends of his. Now, Jeff went on to say that Wendi wanted to get her older son tested for the gifted and talented programs at school and was asking Jeff about advice about who she could get tested or who she could take him to get tested. And she started asking him questions about autobiographical memory. In other words, at what age would it be possible for her young son to start having memories of his own childhood? And at this point, there was an outburst of objections from the defense counsel because Jeff has not been sworn in as an expert witness in this case. Now, Georgia Koppelman seemed to think that he had been deposed as an expert witness. The judge had some strong words at this. In fact, I'm going to try to go to find the exact place because it's not often that the judge gets rattled, but he was obviously upset by what was going on in this situation. So I think it would be interesting for us to see.
Kids start to develop the ability to retain memories.
As to a specific thing that goes to the state of mind of the individual you are testifying about, Mr. Lacass, you may speak. As to your knowledge of any literature or research on this matter, I do not need you to testify on that matter.
What is your profession? What is your background?
I'm a professor of social work. I teach mental health courses.
Okay. So Wendi asks you what?
She asked me when kids develop memory. At what age will kids start to remember what happened to them when they were a kid?
And what was your answer?
I think I said 5 or 6.
Mr. Zalman, sit down. You may testify concerning not the truth of the matter asserted, but how this affected the state of mind. Is
has not been disclosed to the defense.
please approach.
Now, at this point, they went back for a very lengthy sidebar. The defense attorney was asserting this has not been disclosed to the defense. And it turned out actually that he was right. And when they came back from the sidebar, it turned out that Georgia Koppelman had to admit that there was a discovery violation. Although it was inadvertent, it was not intentional. The judge put on the record that, yes, there had been a discovery violation, that Georgia Koppelman intended to use this as expert testimony because Jeff Lacass's area of expertise is in childhood development and mental health, where he does teach classes about this subject. However, because it wasn't disclosed to the defense, they could not use this as expert testimony. So the judge put on the record that there had been a discovery violation. However, it was unintentional, and so no sanctions were perpetrated upon the prosecution for that. Then Jeff Lacass went on to testify about a coffee shop meeting where he had a trip planned with Wendi Adelson, and they had to cancel the trip because Wendi said she was worried about not being back in time to pick up the kids. And he noted that they would have returned the day after the shooting happened. So that was a little bit suspicious to him. Then he talked a little bit about the TV. Now, if you've been following the case, you know, but just in case you don't, the morning of the shooting, Wendi Adelson had an appointment for a TV repairman to come to her house and fix her television. Now, this television was a gift from her brother, Charlie. Charlie joked, "I looked into hiring a hitman but it turns out this TV was less expensive, so I got this for you instead. Well, Wendi said that one of the kids had thrown something at the TV and the screen was not working properly. So not Wendi, but Donna made an appointment with the Geek Squad to come and show up at Wendi's house on the morning of the incident to repair the TV. Now, what Jeff said is that when he saw the TV, pretty much the night before, I guess the week before the incident happened, he said it looked like a person who was 5 or 6 feet tall had just stood in front of the TV and pounded on it with their fist. He said it wasn't a TV that anyone would have really paid attention to or watched. He said it was weird that one time he and Wendi were going to watch a movie, and Wendi insisted that they watch it on this TV, even though there were other TVs in the house that were better, nicer TVs. She insisted they watch it on that TV. It was very weird. Then he also noted an incident, and forgive me because Georgia Koppelman did kind of bounce around with dates on this, but it's really important to note. On April 21st, it was Wendi Adelson's birthday, and they were supposed to have a special date that night. But, they had plans together, but Jeff indicated that he tried to call her, and he tried to text her, but she wasn't answering her phone. She wasn't answering any texts. And so he finally, hours later, went to her house and found Wendi intoxicated. And he said not just with alcohol. He said her eyes were red. And she basically wanted Jeff to stay. But he said he was in no frame of mind to stay. And he was kind of annoyed and frustrated by the whole situation. So Jeff did not stay with her that night. Then he noted that there was a text that he was shown later between Wendi Adelson and her older brother, Robert. Now, Wendi and Robert were not super close, and Robert testified to this yesterday. Wendi didn't usually tell him about her love interest, but there was a text where Wendi disclosed that she had this new boyfriend, Jeff Lacass, and she said, "I haven't told mom and dad about Jeff." But Jeff had already met Donna and Harvey at the time that this text was exchanged. He was not some kind of secret boyfriend. He definitely had already met the parents, and the kids talked about him constantly. So there was a really telling moment when Jeff said that Wendi told him that the only way she would be able to relocate to South Florida was if something happened to Dan Markel. Let me see if I can find it for you here.
Yeah, that's Wendy's Adelson's residence on Aqua Ridge, and that's what it looked like when we were dating.
Okay. Human evidence 86A.
Any objection? No, Your Honor. 86A is admitted at this time.
May I publish?
You may.
All right, so I blurred the boys' faces, but this is how the residents at Aqua Ridge appeared.
Yes.
And
So this is just an interesting moment where there's a picture that's taken where you can see the two boys, their face have been blurred. There's artwork all over the wall here, but, and Jeff said this is always how the house was, that the artwork was never moved, but the day before the incident happened, Jeff noticed that Wendi was removing all of the artwork from the wall, which was another thing he found very suspicious.
the kids' art that's shown on the wall here, was that present during the time that you were dating Wendi Adelson?
Yes.
Was it something that like, art would come down, other art would go up, or was it pretty fixed?
It was maybe some art would get added, but I never saw any come down until July 13th. July 13th.
July 13th, you noticed that the art had been taken down?
We walked into the kitchen, and then Wendi was pulling art off the wall. The only time I'd ever seen her do that.
And I want to ask you about, I've nicknamed it the celebration dinner. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell the jury about that, please?
Yeah.
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for hearsay, understanding the court's prior rule.
Objection is overruled.
Wendi and I reestablished phone contact about 10 days after the murder. She called me. And we had 3 or 4 phone calls. In one of them, she related that her and Charlie had gone to what Charlie called a celebration dinner. And at that dinner, Charlie said something to her. She didn't specify what it was, and she spontaneously vomited all over the table.
Are you aware, sir, that you were suggested as a potential suspect? in this
Yes.
murder? Where were you when Dan Markel was murdered?
I was in Tennessee because I had left on my trip the night before.
So
Rather
you
than this-
changed your plan.
I changed my plans at the last minute.
All right, and you provided law enforcement with some receipts and things to prove that you were in Tennessee at the time?
All that, and I got a flat tire, so I ended up getting videotaped at a Kmart. And I know the TPD used that to exclude me with the timestamp on the surveillance footage.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Thank you, guys. So I wasn't able to find that exact timestamp for you guys to tell you, but basically what he testified was that the only way to relocate is if something happened to Dan Markel. Then there was that conversation that they had on July 13th of 2016, where Wendi said to Jeff, "Can I tell you something in confidence?" Last summer, Charlie looked into, quote, all possible options, including hiring a hitman, which would cost about $15,000. He said later he realized that she probably had said $50,000. And he said, quote, she was dead serious. Now he knew that their relationship was coming to an end. Wendi had asked for some space. She said we should go about a month without talking to each other. But then, very confusingly, he invited her to a yoga class. And he's like, I'm not really a yoga guy, but if this is really what you need to do, I guess let's go ahead. And they went to the yoga class. He said, why were we spending 80 minutes over here when clearly there were more important things we could have been talking about? He said he thought in his mind this was just over, but Wendi wanted to know what his route was going to be when he was leaving to go out of town. And he said that the next day he was going to be leaving at 11 a.m., driving down Capitol Circle in Thomasville, close to the route that the killers used when they fled Tallahassee. He said then she sent him an email that strung everything out for another week, where she said, I just want to go no contact for another week. That would mean that on the 21st of July, they would resume talking to each other. Then that was when he talked about the kids' wall art, and the art was taken down. Then he said Wendi called him 10 days after the murder and talked about this celebration where Charlie said something to her, although wouldn't specify exactly what it was, that made her vomit all over the table. Now, Wendi tried to backpedal and said, well, she hadn't been eating very well. They had gone out to this dinner. She'd had alcohol for the first time in a while they were waiting for their table. And that's what caused her to vomit. Well, that's quite a lot of backpedaling. And Jeff certainly tells a different story of what Wendi told him about that situation. He admitted, again, that he knew he was a suspect, but he was in Tennessee at the time of the murder. He did get his tire changed. There was a video of that. And then later learned that the killers came to Tallahassee in June and July. He didn't know that in June, he was also scheduled to go on a business trip to Gainesville and to leave again at 11 a.m. At the time, he was driving a gray Altima, and the car that the killers rented on that first visit to Tallahassee was a 2004 Nissan Sentra. Can't get much closer than that. Sentra, Altima. Basically, the Altima is a little bit of an upgraded version of the Nissan Sentra, but there aren't very many car rental places that rent the Altima. The Sentra is an economy car, so it would be much more common. So then on cross-examination, Jackie Fulford came back and asked him about the grandmother motion, which was this motion that we know that was filed by Dan Markel to essentially restrict Donna Adelson's contact with her two grandsons to supervised only visitation. Jeff testified that the whole family was upset, but that all of the communication about the feelings of the family came through Wendi, and he didn't directly speak to Donna about it. The defense attorney brought up the idea that Jeff had said that Wendi was deeply deceitful. And then the prosecution asked for his response to be stricken. Now, the reason why was because he had no personal knowledge of Donna Adelson's feelings, that they had just sort of made small talk. Then the defense attorney went on to say that Wendi insisted on watching a movie on Charlie's TV. And Jeff confirmed, yes, that was a strange evening. She didn't have to insist. It was her kids. It was her house. It's kind of awkward dating somebody with kids because you have to make these kinds of accommodations. And so then the defense attorney asked, is it possible that the TV mark could have been made by a child? Was it kid-sized or adult-sized? And he said, I can't really say. So all of that to me, I think was a really weak attempt from the defense to sort of poke some holes in the things that Jeff said. There were a lot of other things that they could have gone after, but to focus on whether the mark that was made on the TV was kid size or adult size, I mean, there's really no way to measure that. Even if you had actually gotten the Geek Squad person out there to testify as to what kind of damage was done to the TV, what difference does it make? That's not the point. The point is that it's possible that Wendi could have damaged the TV herself instead of the kids, but there's no way to know for sure. What I find suspicious is that Donna made the appointment for the repairman to come to Wendi's house, and then after the repairman left, Wendi deleted the appointment from her phone. Why would she do that? She hadn't deleted any of her other appointments from her phone. Well, then we had one of Charlie Adelson's ex-girlfriends, June Umchinda. And there was a little bit of a joke in the courtroom because the last time she was supposed to testify, she didn't show up for a long time. She was lost. Nobody could find her. Turns out she had set her alarm for the wrong time to show up in court, and then her alarm went off 10 minutes after she was in court, according to what people have said afterwards. And this time, they couldn't find her again. And the judge said, send out the police, send out the FBI, everybody that we're looking for this witness. Well, she did eventually show up wearing a side-tied red dress and a huge black bag, which apparently is kind of her signature. She certainly had beautiful hair, beautiful nails. So Charlie definitely has a type. Anyway, she showed up and she testified that she and Charlie had a relationship between October of 2015 and June of 2017. At this time, Charlie was not being investigated, and they sort of had a fairy tale relationship. She said that she met Donna Adelson about 5 or 6 times, and that that Charlie and Donna were very close, that they worked together. They spoke every single day. Donna was the one in charge. And she, June, knew nothing about Dan Markel. And when she asked about it, basically, Charlie had said, when June had asked Charlie about his family, he indicated that Dan Markel had been shot in the head and that they had this sort of pall hanging over the family because of this tragedy that happened. But what she said that was most telling is she said that nobody was ever curious or upset about who might have killed Dan. Now, she said post-bump, everything changed. Charlie didn't mention it, that it had happened, but he wasn't sleeping. He was extra stressed. He was worried. He was depressed. And then from May to June, she said that all of these behaviors escalated. She saw an episode on TV that sort of detailed this crime. And what she made note of is that the money that the hitmen were paid with was stapled. The cash was stapled together. And she said that made something click in her mind because she noted that Charlie had money in his safe that was stapled together in the same way. She said it was very odd, something she'd never seen before, and she made note of it. Then she had lots of talks. Charlie had lots of talks about Katherine Magban. Charlie met with Katherine at the dermatologist's office. And every single time after they met together, that Charlie became angry and short-fused. Then when Katherine was arrested, he was even more stressed. He started acting crazy, and he got a second phone. Then when Charlie was in Asia, he started using WhatsApp to communicate with June. And he said, we kind of just continued that after he got back from Asia, but she knew that this was a way for people to communicate with each other that couldn't be traced. She said he started keeping a change of clothes next to the bed and a gun in the nightstand. She knew that he had had a fight with Wendi, and that had caused a lot of tension and strain for him. And she also noted that Donna Adelson was a mess at this time, meaning that she was physically drained, she was upset, she was crying, and she was taking painkillers for stress. She said at one point that Donna noted that she thought that Dan Markel was haunting her from the grave. She said her family was crumbling down. Charlie at this time mentioned something about paying for half of Katherine Magban's breast implants, and she thought that was very odd. But they sort of joked about it, and she sort of laughed it off. Then on cross-examination, they brought up the fact that Charlie lies, but he's able to make it believable, and June agreed with that. She said that he had a large gun safe. It was the size of a fridge, and there was money and guns in there. And then they pointed out that she was simply speculating, that nobody was curious about who had killed Dan Markel. But she said, yeah, but it was odd that they weren't actively trying to search for this person. Then in the in the Katherine Magban trial, they pointed out that June had said that might not have been the exact words, with Donna saying that Dan Markel was haunting their family. And she said, yeah, I said that. It might not have been the exact words. And this is one of those gotcha things where the defense attorneys are trying to poke holes in what she said before, because it's kind of damning to their client if she said that Dan Markel was haunting her family. So she said, yeah, that might not have been the exact words, but that was the feeling that I got. Then we heard from Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was a former friend of Dan Markel. Sorry, former friend of Charlie Adelson. My mistake. Correct myself. He said they were friends from 2013 to 2019, and they were very close. He said Donna did not like Dan Markel. That was very apparent from the things that she said. And he said that Katherine Magban looked like all of Charlie's other girlfriends. She wasn't really special. She didn't stand out. And he also talked about how weird it was that he kept money stapled together in his safe. He also noted that Dan Markel was not a topic of discussion that they were allowed to talk about. He said post-bump that Charlie became agitated and nervous, and then made a comment that he could get away with anything because he could keep his mouth shut. He said after the bump, Charlie became much more needy, and he kept repeating things over and over. And Ryan thought this was in an effort for Charlie to sort of convince himself of a certain truth. He said the more that he repeated these stories, it was like he was trying to convince himself and Ryan at the same time that what he was saying was true. Then on cross-examination, The defense attorneys mentioned a deposition that had happened just in August of this year, just a couple of weeks before this trial started, where he noted that he barely knew Donna Adelson and said that she was pleasant. And he said that there was an ugly ending in his and Charlie's friendship. But they did note the stapled money. That was something that he recalled with accuracy. Then they noted that he just said he had a feeling that Dan Markel was a topic that was off limits, that nobody had directly ever said that to him. He said, yeah, but every time I brought it up, I got a feeling that it was not okay to talk about it. He said it was implied, but there was no specific statement about it. And that's where they ended that testimony. Now, during the break, there was an objection by the defense to hearsay in an upcoming PowerPoint for the next witness. And after lunch, the defense began arguing that they had not received the changes in the PowerPoint in time. However, the judge called them out saying, basically, you've had this PowerPoint since May, and you're just now calling out things that you haven't received. He was pretty frustrated with the defense at this point. The prosecution said it's all the same as in May, and the judge said that I gave you all of this time last Friday when we were let out of court a little bit early to point out anything that they had problems with. He said, nobody took me up on it. So then he gave the defense 10 minutes to go through this PowerPoint. And when that 10 minutes was up, he basically said, look, are you guys ready? Are you done? Is there anything you need to bring up? And there was nothing that they could really point out. The judge was very, very frustrated with this situation going on. So he went ahead and let everything go forward. Now, the next witness was Mary Hall, who's a chief inspector general, and basically was testifying to a lot of the financial situations that were happening in this crime. The main takeaways from this, and I would say if you're a nerd brain at all like I am, you should go and check out this PowerPoint presentation, because it was really cool to see everything just completely spelled out for you. The finances of all of the people who were paid, the dental practice, and all of that was lined out. But here's what you need to know, the condensed version, okay? There were 44 checks that were paid from the Adelson Institute to Katherine Magban, all signed by Donna Adelson. And they found it interesting that when they asked for discovery on this topic, the only thing that came over was a spreadsheet. And she said in the past, when somebody has employment with a certain employer, that they send over all the employment records. For example, a contract or an employment agreement, as well as the employee handbook that had been signed by a person and a copy of their job description. But none of that came in the discovery. It was simply a spreadsheet of all of these checks that had been paid and when they had been paid and the amounts. And then there was another very telling text from Donna Adelson to Charlie saying that Harvey's part of the practice needed $25,000 to cover expenses for the month. And was it okay? Could Charlie cover that? And Charlie said, sure, no problem. And then Donna said, I will just move $25,000 from your pile over to Harvey's pile. And what she was referencing was the fact that they had this big safe with piles of cash in it. And she was just going to move those stapled stacks of cash from Charlie's pile over to Harvey's pile. And that was their method of keeping track of the money. They encouraged patients in the practice to pay cash rather than paying with credit card or paying with a check. And they gave a discount when paying with cash. Now, the defense did come back and say it was simply, the cash discount was only eliminating the charge, like the 3% credit card charge or whatever, but they did highly encourage their patients to pay in cash. And they had a huge safe with stacks of cash in it. And that's not how most people run their businesses. It is not one of those things that most people do. And they certainly don't staple their stacks of cash together. Now, I just have to point this out because it's so freaking hilarious every single time it comes up. And we'll talk about this again when Katherine Magban testifies, but she noted that the money that she was paid with for this hit felt damp at the time that she received it. And when she asked Charlie about it, Charlie said that Donna had literally washed the stacks of cash so that they couldn't be traced. I don't know what Donna thought she was washing off of those bills. Fingerprints, I don't know, traces of the dental office, but that's not how you launder money. That's not the definition of laundering money. And I just find it pretty ridiculous. Anyway, the next person to testify was Clarica Spoltore. She was formerly Labveda. She had gotten married, but she was Harvey's hygienist for over 40 years in the dental practice. And what she testified to was basically these strange practices of accepting cash. She also testified that she had never seen Katherine Magban in the office except as a patient. So Katherine was not working at the dental office. She noted all the other people that were working there, the assistants and the, dental hygienists, and then Donna doing the bookkeeping, being at the front desk. Katherine Magban was never there. So even though she was on the payroll and she got 44 separate checks, and most of these checks came bi-weekly, she was never in the office actually performing a job. Then finally, the witness everybody was waiting for today, Katherine Magban, came to the stand. Now she's been convicted and she is serving time. She's serving a life sentence plus 2 years. Now she is eligible for parole at some point, and she noted that to the prosecutor that at some point she'd like to see her children, but she hasn't been promised anything in exchange for her appearance and her testimony here today. So basically, she said that on October 31st of 2013 was the first time that Charlie solicited her to find someone to hurt Dan Markel. He said there was somebody who needed to be hurt over a custody situation. And then she noted that on July 1st of 2014, there was an altercation between her boyfriend, Sigfredo Garcia, and Charlie Adelson. Apparently, there was some jealousy that was going on there because of their on-again, off-again relationship. Then she also noted that there was an accidental call from Sigfredo to Harvey Adelson. She said, Sigfredo didn't know who Harvey was, but all he was looking for was a dentist in that area. That's all he had to go on. So he accidentally called Harvey Adelson, and that's the only phone contact the two of them had. She said that during one of their dates, and this was post-bump, that Charlie stepped out 5 separate times to talk with Donna Adelson privately, and she didn't know what was going on. So he would get a phone call, he would step outside, speak to her, and come back in. He did not talk to Charlie about Sigfredo, and vice versa. Did not talk to Sigfredo about Charlie, so they didn't know each other. What she knew was that there was a potential person who needed to be harmed. And this was just a really sad moment for me to realize that, Dan Markel, who is trying to be a good dad to his sons, trying to raise them Orthodox Jewish, for him to realize that basically, I don't know, for me to realize that Dan Markel was being targeted just because of this custody situation, and for Charlie to refer to him as a potential person that needed to be harmed. I just thought that was a moment where just my stomach dropped in this trial. Katherine confirmed that the first trip to Tallahassee was to be, quote, a scoping trip. And she reached out to Charlie and she said, there are going to be expenses. We're going to need a rental car. We're going to need, food and gas for these guys to go up to do this trip to scope this out. She said that Sigfredo was sometimes hard to reach, but after that first trip, when nothing had happened, she started getting a lot of pressure from Charlie to get it done. She said she knew nothing about traveling to Dan Markel. She said all the information was in an envelope that Charlie had handed her, told her not to touch it or open it, and just to pass it off to Sigfredo. So she didn't know anything about Dan. She didn't know anything about what was actually going to happen She just knew that there was a potential person that needed to be harmed, and all the information was in the envelope. Then Charlie came back and told her, well, I guess after the incident happened, that Katherine had come to Charlie's house for them to get together, and Charlie was pacing back and forth with a gun in his hand, and he said there was an accident. He gave Katherine a Xanax. He took one as well. He said, your money is in the trunk. They got up the next morning, and so Katherine just didn't check the trunk. She just trusted that Charlie had put the money there, and she went to Sigfredo's apartment, but she couldn't find him or get in touch with him. And she said that then Luis Rivera just got into the passenger seat of her car. And she said, the money is in the trunk. So Luis went back there. He removed the envelope from the trunk and gave her cut to her in a Ziploc bag. And she noted at that time that the money was stapled together and that it was damp. And when she asked Charlie about it, Charlie said that Donna Adelson had physically washed the money. Now, then they talked about the paychecks that she received from the Adelson Institute. She said sometimes there was one, but sometimes there were multiple checks at a time, and that Charlie would give her instructions not to cash them all at once, but to cash them spread out. She said sometimes she followed that instruction and sometimes she didn't. Then, when Sigfredo got arrested, the checks stopped. She said that was a big sign to her that things had gone wrong, and she did a huge sigh when they went to sidebar to converse about this. Then she went on to testify that she and Charlie met for dinner at one point after the bump had happened. She said that they sat in his car together and he turned up the radio, leaned into her, and told her that his mom was approached and that Tato had gotten a paper. Tato was Luis Rivera. So she gave the paper, I guess she gave the paper to Tato because she was the one who was the go-between. And basically, Charlie wanted Katherine to be the one to call the phone number on the paper and figure it out. He said it's one of two scenarios. It's either the FBI or it's somebody who's trying to get money out of us. Now, Charlie never said that this murder was to benefit his mother or his sister. But Katherine knew it, and that's what she testified to. He never said it, but she knew that that's what it was, that his sister wanted to get custody of her boys. She said Charlie tends to go on his little rants, but they always spoke in code. And then Georgia Kappelman ended the testimony by saying, innocent people don't talk in code. There would have been no need to talk in code if you hadn't done anything wrong. And Katherine Magban confirmed that that was correct. Now, I noted this while we were talking or while we were chatting in the live chat today on the stream, is that this cross-examination made me cross because Jackie Fulford, who is one of Donna Adelson's defense attorneys, came up and treated Katherine Magban with a lot of contempt. She was very patronizing. And she basically tried to shame her for her role in it, even though Katherine has already noted that she did not tell the truth in the first two trials, but now she does want to tell the truth. She wants the truth to be out there, and she's hoping at some point to see her boys again. She just wants the truth to be told. And so even though she is not a savory character, she's definitely at fault in this. She's serving her time. And at this point, she really just wants justice to be done. She wants all of the people to be held accountable. Now, I can't blame her for wanting Donna to be held accountable. But basically, when Georgia Kappelman came back with her cross-examination, this was the only thing that she wanted to know. She said essentially that Donna Adelson talked to Charlie, that Charlie talked to Katherine, and that Katherine talked to Sigfredo. Sigfredo didn't know Donna. Sigfredo didn't know Charlie. And vice versa. Donna didn't know Katherine. Well, she'd met her one time. Donna didn't know Sigfredo. All of the communication went through Katherine. And that's what matters, is that Donna talked to Charlie, Charlie talked to Katherine, Katherine talked to Sigfredo. That was the line of communication. So Donna was not innocent in this because she orchestrated this with Charlie, allegedly. Then the final witness for today, as if that was not enough, was Sergeant Christopher Corbett of the Tallahassee Police Department. And he basically teaches digital forensics, and he was there to testify as to the call detail records that happened between all of these co-conspirators. And just suffice it to say that there were plenty of indicators of who was communicating with whom. And he testified to exactly what Georgia Kappelman had just lined out, that the lines of communication went through the co-conspirators in that way. But Donna was the one at the top of the food chain telling Charlie what to do. And then Charlie was communicating that to Katherine. And then Katherine was communicating it to Sigfredo. And Sigfredo was communicating it to Luis Rivera. And so that was basically what they wanted to get on record. Now, I'm going to be live streaming this entire trial the whole time. I've noted since the very beginning that the prosecution has a long list of witnesses. They have over 50 witnesses that are going to testify in this case. And so far, only 17 of them have testified. Now, I know that it's only Tuesday, so we have 3 more days this week and 5 more days next week. But I'm very, very concerned that we're not going to get all the way done with this by September 5th, which is when the judge told the jury that they would be finished. I'm worried about whether or not the defense is going to put on more witnesses than just Donna. We've been told all along that Donna is going to testify. And I mistakenly put on my thumbnail this morning, as well as in my description, that we were going to hear from jailhouse snitches today, because we're all looking forward to hearing that Donna Adelson talked to some people in jail and actually gave them a script from which to read as to what they were going to testify to, making Donna look innocent. So I was hoping to hear from them today, but they obviously weren't there today. Much more explosive witnesses today. Hopefully they'll be testifying tomorrow, and we'll get to hear exactly what those jailhouse snitches have to say. Suffice it to say, there's a lot more to uncover in this trial. Even though there have been 4 convictions so far, there's still so much information that we don't know yet. And the question on everybody's mind is whether or not Wendi Adelson is going to be charged. I have to say that the testimony this morning of Jeff Lacass convinced me more than ever that Wendi was actually allegedly the one pulling all of the strings and manipulating not only Charlie and Donna, but Jeff Lacass and all the other players as well. Let me know what you think. I'm interested to know if you think I missed anything important today. And as always, I do want to be corrected if I get something wrong. Contrary to popular belief, I think in yesterday's recap, I accidentally said Donna when I meant Wendi. Although if we're talking about teenage behavior, let's be honest. It's both Donna and Wendi who are engaging in teenage behavior. They both have the emotional immaturity of a 13-year-old, and neither one of them are capable of clear, honest, direct communication. They are both allegedly, in my opinion, trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes and manipulate the whole situation so that they get exactly what they want, which is for them to be in charge, for them to live where they want, to have the kids, to have Wendi, to have Donna, all of them together. Now, here's another question for you. Do you think Harvey knew? And if so, how much? Now, up until this point, I've sort of considered Harvey to be just sort of an innocent bystander, a little bit enabling. There is pretty good evidence to suggest that Donna was trying to keep all of this from Harvey, plausible deniability and all of that, keeping him from knowing what's going on. But I'm imagining Harvey right now with Charlie in jail and Donna in jail. He's probably just living the bachelor life and kind of enjoying not having somebody jibber-jabbering at him all the time. I'm interested to know what you guys think too. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. For now, I will just say that I'm going to be live streaming for the rest of the week. And you're right, some people are pointing out only for 4 days next week because Monday, Labor Day, is going to be a day off for the court. So it'll be really interesting to see how this all goes down. Now, if you know somebody else who's interested in the case, please let them know that our live chat during the streaming of the trial is the snarkiest and most fun live chat out there. We have a lot of fun in there together. And also, I'm going to be doing these recaps every single day. So those of you who don't have time to watch the entire trial, you don't have to. Look at this. We're just under an hour with all the information you need to know. Thanks, as always, for supporting the channel. Thanks so much for subscribing to the channel. And please hit the like on your way in or out. And hopefully I will see you again tomorrow morning for more live streaming of the Donna Adelson trial. Please take care of yourself.